Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and in this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 24 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Kiev. A very interesting statement was made by the Election Commission of Ukraine. Yesterday they stated that elections in Ukraine can only be held after 6 months of preparation. Now it is impossible. I would like to remind you that Zelensky a day ago stated that I'm now asking the US, including Europe, to ensure security for elections. Furthermore, Zelensky stated that elections are possible within 60 or 90 days after energy truce reached. So, as you can see, we have different positions between Zelensky and the Election Commission, which most likely means that first Zelensky said, but later he decided to change his position through the official Ukrainian authorities, which means that there are going to be no elections in Ukraine in 2026, or at least the Western countries, the European countries first of all, and Zelensky will try to use this situation with the purpose to postpone the moment when Ukraine would be forced to accept the Russia's demands. The next few days will be very serious. Today we are also seeing a strengthening of our combat aviation. Details are not yet disclosed. That was also stated by Zelensky, so we see that from the other side, Zelensky continue reinforcing his army with the purpose to continue the war with the Russian Federation. At the same time, we received a very interesting article from the Telegraph. The US is proposing a Korean model for ending the war for Ukraine, a demilitarized zone along the entire line. On a map, this would look like a line dividing Ukrainian and Russian territories. The main elements could be as follows. First, the demilitarized zone, an area free of military forces on either side, with international observers to monitor compliance with the ceasefire. Checkpoints, locations for inspections and monitoring to prevent escalation of the conflict. Humanitarian corridors, roads for delivering humanitarian aid and evacuating civilians. International presence, the involvement of the United Nations peacekeeping forces or other organizations to ensure stability in the region. So, but according to the current situation, we understand that most likely both the Russians, neither the Russians or the Ukrainians will accept this plan. Furthermore, another important statement was published by the main Directorate of Intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. They stated that the Russian Federation has increased its activities in Transnistria. Unmanned aerial vehicles are being actively produced, operators are being trained, and mobilization has been significantly reinforced, according to a Ukrainian source citing the main Directorate of Intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. So the Ukrainians are trying to tell us that the Russians are preparing themselves before something in the area of Transnistria. So maybe in 2026 is going to be a final year for this region. We're talking about for peace in this region, and something very terrible might happen in 2026. At the same time, we see that despite talks and despite statements made by Russians and Ukrainians regarding the peaceful settlement of the conflict, we see that both the Russians and the Ukrainians continue escalating the conflict. For example, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians launched another massive attack in the central part of Ukraine. The Russians attacked once again the Kremenchuk oil refinery plant. The Russians used dozens of drones and several missiles to attack this oil refinery, and the sources are saying that that was something like a strike back on Ukrainian attack. The Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, for example, today stated that during the previous night between the 11 p.m. and the 7 a.m. of the 11th of December of 2025, the Russians managed to bring down 287 drones that were launched from the territory of Ukraine. So almost 300 drones Ukrainians launched to attack objects of critical infrastructure and energy facilities through the Russian Federation. And this attack wasn't the only attack through the previous night. According to information we have, also Ukrainians attacked another commercial vessel in the territory of the Black Sea. Here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking the vessel in the Black Sea that was transporting oil of the Russian Federation, or was heading towards the Novorossiysk with the purpose to get oil and then to move to India probably, or to some other country. So this is the fifth vessel, commercial vessel vessel that was attacked by Ukrainian side since the beginning of the special military operation with Navy drones, which obviously another step towards escalation of the conflict. At the same time, the President of the United States of America made a very important statement during the previous 24 hours. He said that Zelensky needs to be realistic. 82% of Ukrainians are demanding peace. They're losing a huge number of people. European leaders want to meet with me in Europe this week, and the US President said, "We want to know a few things before the meeting. We don't want to waste time. Zelensky needs to be realistic. Ukraine hasn't had an election in a long time. They're losing a huge number of people. 82% of Ukrainians are demanding a deal. They want a deal. I understand that. They're losing thousands and thousands of people every week. They want this to end," Trump said. So this is the statement of the President of the United States of America. We see that the President of the United States changed his opinion regarding Zelensky. Now all these statements means just one thing, that starting of December of 2025, the United States of America and the President of the United States of America are not considering Zelensky as a legal president of Ukraine, at least partially. So all these statements are telling him that you need to make elections, otherwise sooner or later we will not recognize you as a legal president. You will be nothing in Ukraine. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of very important updates. And first, let's talk about the Zaporozhye direction, where the Russians continue their assault operation on the city of Gulyai-Polye. During the previous 24-48 hours, we had lots of changes. This is the situation by the end of the 9th of September of 2025. This is the 10th of September. The Russians just entered the northeastern part of the settlement along the Bachanskaya Street, according to geolocations. And by the beginning of the 11th of September of 2025, the Russians, as you can see, managed to improve their position significantly. So the Russians, and this is a very important thing that I would like to point to attention, the Russians not just improved their positions in the eastern and the northeastern part of the settlement of Gulyai-Polye, the Russians managed to cross the river of Gaichul. So in this video that was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, we can see how Ukrainians were attacking positions of the armored forces of the Russian Federation along the Velika Street, so in this area. One of the FPV drone attacks took place exactly in this area. This building was attacked, and based on this video we came to the conclusion that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to cross the river of Gaichul to enter the eastern part of the settlement of Gulyai-Polye, and now the Russians are fighting on the Ukrainian side of the river, which means that Russians entered the most difficult part of the battle for Gulyai-Polye, the part when they need to dig in deeper. And most likely they will do this, and if they are able to consolidate their troops on the Ukrainian side of the river, this is going to be the beginning of the end for the contingent of the armored forces of Ukraine and Ukraine control over the settlement of Gulyai-Polye itself. At the same time, the Russians continue their offensive operation in the vicinity of the settlement by the name of Varvarovka. The Russians are advancing from the north in the southern direction, and the Russians are advancing from the east in the western direction. This information was provided by neutral mappers. Now let's move further. Let's talk about the Pokrovsk agglomeration and the Dnipropetrovsk agglomeration. During the previous 24 hours, this video was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking positions of the armored forces of the Russian Federation along the eastern part of the settlement of Novopidgorodny. So this settlement is located on the territory of the Dnipropetrovsk region. This settlement is neighboring with the settlement of Molodetska. So Ukrainians attacked this construction with FPV drone, which means that this construction was captured by the armored forces of the Russian Federation. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map. This is the situation by the end of the 10th of December, and this is the 11th of December. So which means that the Russians began advancing in the Dnipropetrovsk direction, most likely with the purpose to attack along the railways the settlement by the name of Mizhova. Now let's talk about the cities of Pokrovsk and Mirnograd. First, let's talk about the city of Pokrovsk. I would like to remind you that pro-Ukrainian sources and the chief of the general staff of the armored forces of Ukraine, the commander-in-chief Seversk, stated that there are no Russians in the northern part of the city, that the northern part of the city is under complete control of the armored forces of Ukraine, that the situation is stable despite talks and rumors that were spread by Russians. So in this video we can see how Russians were moving their armored vehicles, tanks, infantry fighting carriers through the northern part of the city of Pokrovsk. So imagine yourself, Seversk is saying that there are no Russians, but there are not just Russians, there are Russian vehicles and tanks, which means that the Russians have both strong and very confident control over the territory. So the Russians in this video were trying to cross the railways in the central part of the city with the purpose to move them further in the northwestern direction to attack in the direction of the settlement by the name of Grushna. As of this convoy that was transferred by Russians, most likely this convoy was destroyed, but this convoy was destroyed along 0525 road. This video was published today by pro-Ukrainian sources, and here we can see how a Ukrainian drone was flying above the 0525 road, and we can see how Ukrainians were filming a lot of vehicles destroyed during this attack. So most likely those vehicles that we saw in the previous video were destroyed somewhere along the 0525 road. At the same time, we received the video from the northwestern part. Another video here we can see how Russians were storming the building in the northwestern part, how Russian soldiers were attacking this territory. We will not watch this video due to violence and casualties, but you can always watch this video on the map. And according to information we have, the Russians were attacking this territory. Based on this video, we haven't adjusted anything. We just confirm using these three updates. We just try to confirm that Russians have a strong control over the northwestern part, and that Ukrainians have nothing there, have no control in this area. They can't counterattack, probably to answer, but sooner or later the Ukrainians are being forced to fall back. The city of Mirnograd, during the previous 24 hours, the map has been adjusted significantly, even during the previous 48 hours. So it's better to start with the city of Mirnograd from the 9th of December. This is the situation by the end of the 9th of December. The Russians were bombing and attacking positions of the armed forces of Ukraine, and we start receiving first reports and first updates that Ukrainians left completely the most southern part of the cauldron. On the 10th of December, we adjusted the territory to the east of the city of Mirnograd and the eastern part based on the video published by pro-Ukrainian sources. Here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation almost in the central part. So this building was under attack of the armed forces of Ukraine, and based on this video we adjusted everything basically to the east and to the southeast. Furthermore, yesterday several mappers, several pro-Russian sources reported that Russians managed to improve their positions from the south. They captured lots of territories. Furthermore, the Russians improved their positions in the northeastern direction of the settlement, and the Russians improved their positions from the south. And as for the 11th of December, the map has been adjusted significantly. As you can see, most of these territories were completely colored in Russian favor, and most of the territories were colored based on the video that was published by pro-Ukrainian sources. Here we can see how a Ukrainian FPV drone was attacking a soldier of the armed forces of the Russian Federation that was moving in the southern part of the northern part of the city. So another important thing that I would like to point to attention, that there is a snow, which means that the video is very fresh, that it was made probably several hours ago, because the snow just started in this region. So this Ukrainian attack took place exactly at this point. Based on this video we came to a conclusion, and of course based on the reports published by different sources, by neutral mappers, by pro-Ukrainian sources, we have adjusted the map significantly by coloring everything to the south of this point. Now Ukrainians control a very small part of the city of Mirnograd, and telling the truth, we believe that during the next 3 days the Russians will announce complete control over the territory. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the area of the city of Seversk, where the Russians launched their major offensive operation, this time most likely towards the city by the name of Slaviansk. So we believe that today or maybe tomorrow the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will announce that the settlement of Seversk was captured by the armed forces of the Russian Federation. This video was published today by pro-Russian sources. Here we can see 2 Russian soldiers and 2 civilians that were saying that the city of Seversk was captured by the armed forces of the Russian Federation. So this is how the map changed during the previous several days. This is the situation by the end of the 6th of December, and this is the moment when everything started. So this is the end of the 7th, this is the 8th, this is the 9th, this is the 10th of December, and this is the 11th of December. The Russians captured up to 90% of the settlement, and the most important is that Russians managed to cross the river of Bakhmutka. Several pro-Russian sources stated that Russians control up to 95% 50% and even more. So Ukrainians control probably just 2 streets of the most western part of the settlement, and most likely these 2 streets would be abandoned in coming days or in coming hours. So maybe today the Minister of Defense will confirm this. Furthermore, the Russians began offensive operation in the direction of the settlement of Alexandrovka from the southeast. This information today was provided by neutral mappers and by pro-Russian sources. So this is the situation in this area. The Russians are advancing, trying to get as close as possible to the cities of Kramatorsk and Slaviansk. Furthermore, as you can see, we have huge changes on the Liman direction. During the previous 24 hours, a video was published from the most northern part of the settlement of Dibrova. In this video, we can see how Russian infantrymen were moving through the forest in the direction of the settlement by the name of Dibrova, and how Ukrainians were making a video how Ukrainians were attacking positions. So Ukrainian attack took place exactly at this building, which means that the building was captured by the moment of attack by Russians. So based on this video, we have adjusted the map and we have colored huge territories in the complete control of Russians. In the area of the settlement of Drobышevo, Novoselovka, Yarova, another video was published by pro-Ukrainian sources. Here we can see almost the same story. Russians, sabotage and reconnaissance group of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, left the forest and entered the building on the territory of the settlement of Yarova, and then Ukrainians began attacking Russians exactly at this point. So based on this video and based on the report published by Neutral Mapper, we have adjusted the map in this area. So we see Russians are advancing in the direction of the settlement of Slaviansk from many directions, trying to attack and take the settlement in pincers. The situation for the armed forces of Ukraine is a critical one, and most likely during the next days we're going to get lots of changes in this area. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds to we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.